in the streets of Lincoln were a little too dangerous for Bill. But in any event, seriously, I benefited greatly from that. I worked with a man who taught me a lot about working, and he taught me a lot about farm animals. I was so small that in order to harness the horses, I had to stand on a little step ladder. And my big job out there was plowing corn with a team. And my legs were so short, we had to adjust the seat. And I bounced all day in a metal seat. That's probably the reason I had to go to a proctologist later on. But in any event, there was a real method. In those days, you plowed your corn 3 times. You plowed the first time, then you crossed it. That meant you take your field. You can't do that today. Of course, they plant the corn differently. But you waited the first time, and then you crossed it, and then you did what you call laying and by. And that meant for the last time you were plowing that field. And we had a little device next to the seat on the trailer, or on the plow, that was a long stick with 3 little prongs of wire. And if you covered up a hill of corn, you had to stop and either get out of there or back the horses up if you could do that, and uncover the covered up corn, put the stick back in its place and move on. I uncovered a lot of corn. One thing I learned about working with animals is they came first. You had to take care of them. My job was to make sure my horses were watered, and I also had to curry them. And it was hard for me because I was a little guy. I had to use a ladder to get up to curry the horses. But I'm certainly happy that I had that experience, and it paid off. One thing I learned, never put a piece of equipment away dirty. And he meant that. And he would ask me when I'd sit down to eat at night, "Billy, did you grease a plow?" "Yes, sir." Because he was a stickler on that. Making sure that that plow did not accumulate any dew during the night, and thus perhaps have a channel to rust on us a little bit. The thing about the country is I learned a lot just by osmosis. I had a granddad who was a stickler about the way things are done. That's not a bad way. In any event, I enjoyed those experiences very much. And a big thing about working for a kid, these were long before the days of the combine, and we had the threshing time. That's when the grain was ready, and the threshing machines, and they were powered off of a big tractor with the big wide bells. And I still have a picture somewhere around my house of little Billy standing on the wheel, the iron wheel of that huge tractor. My job on the farm when they were threshing season was to run around with a cart and a horse and earthen jugs wrapped in burlap that were soaked in water to keep the water cool. And I had to make sure that I run around to all the men all the time, make sure they had the chance to have something to drink. And I was on schedule. And the other job I had on the farm was pulling the hay up into the hay mound. Horse and cart on one side of the barn, and then right up through the barn and back. And when Edgar Sisson said, "Whoa," he meant whoa right now. He didn't want 10 feet down the line. He meant whoa right now. And if I didn't whoa, I got a tongue lash. I learned a few lessons, a few new words. They weren't Webster's. And another time, he finally turned me, he figured I was okay to turn me loose to take the grain wagon to the elevator. And so I proudly filled up the elevator from the threshing machine and headed down the long lane and went to the Burtonview elevator. Now, do you know how they unloaded a wagon in those days? A very simple thing. They had a big rope with a loop on the end of it, and they just put the loop over the hubs of the front wheels of the wagon, lift it up, away you go. So one time, the horses seemed to want to get home. The horse will want to get home. I don't know, if it's in Billings, Montana, or New Holland, Illinois. If they're away and they want to go back home, they're gonna go back. So these horses started to trot as I was going back to the farm. It was a mile north of Burtonville. Corrugated road, you know, pretty rough. And I just let them run. Ooh, that was not a good thing to do. We turned down that long lane to go into the farmstead. My grandfather just happened to be at that part of the field. And these horses were wet with sweat, saddle soaked, and Billy was quarantined for a long time. Edgar Sisson was very, very disappointed with his grandson. But it was a learning experience for him. The threshing machine was threshing time was a good time for a farmer. A lot of work. The neighbors came from around the farms around him, and they all would help one another out. And the big thing about threshing time was the way we ate. The ladies from the various farms came around to help the wife on that particular farm, and we ate. And I found out that if we weren't ready to go back into the field, we didn't eat first. That was the pecking order. The pecking order was that if you had plenty of time, you were going to eat last, because these fellows had to get back into the work. They were anxious to get back and get that field done. So the farm business for a kid was a great thing. I learned a lot, and I stayed all summer. And about the week before school started, I came back to Lincoln Avenue, and then I was back in for the winter, as they say. But I'm just trying to think. Yes, the way we watered our horses, obviously had a big well, and I found out that early on that was really cold water, and it'd be nice to take a swim. And so one day I just stripped off and jumped in that tank. I didn't work about the buzz that was on the bottom of that tank, really slim. I went underwater right away. I came out right away, scared the daylights out of me. I thought that was going to be a good thing, and it probably was. My granddad had a big windmill right next to the barn, and right next to that was a big water tank. And it was my job to make sure that windmill was on when it was time and off when it was not time. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that a lot. Now, if anybody has any questions or any comments, I want them to feel comfortable. I cut this down to 3.5 hours, so it'll be all right. I'm sorry, yes, ma'am.
When you were talking about fairgrounds, I'm
Yes,
thinking that you were talking about the first fairgrounds.
No, I'm thinking about the
Where it is
1937,
now?
where it is now. Yes,
No,
now.
I knew of the fairgrounds when it was.
Get over here and sit down.
No, well, that story hooks up with William Maxwell.
Yes.
I know that's famous.
Yes, well, yes.
Because I know that that's where the trains used to come in with the circus animals, go down Wyatt Avenue, and they were right where the high school is now. That's where the first fairgrounds was.
Is that right? I don't think I ever read that, no.
Well, I learned that from looking up and knowing some people that dealt with William Maxwell.
Mr. Maxwell,
That wrote
Was
the
he
book.
not?
That wrote the
Yes.
book about Lincoln. So long, see you tomorrow.
so long, see you tomorrow.
Yeah, that was on our farm.
Is that right?
That took place on some of our farm.
Was Mr. Maxwell editor of the New Yorker
He
magazine?
was.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
He did.
Yes,
So
Terry?
they always said, I was going to ask the same thing about William Maxwell, and so long, see you tomorrow. Was that really true, that murder investigation?
That book is written as fiction, but there's more truth than fiction to it.
Oh.
And I think it's a lot of it can be collaborated in newspaper stories.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Could you give me the years that the Chautauqua was closing down and when they were moving those cottages out?
Yeah, what was going on?
Chautauqua.
The John cottages.
What were the years that
Well,
the Chautauqua was closed?
No, I can come close, because I was a kid in high school, and I graduated from high school in '41, and that's about the time, in the late '30s, is when my father moved that cottage to Lincoln Lakes. So somewhere I'm going to estimate in the mid-30s would be, yes, Connie?
Right here, I'm reading from the program that Nancy Belgall gave about the summers, Chautauqua summers and Saturday nights in Logan County. She said the attendance, Bill Gossett, whose grandparents' assistants had a cottage on the Chautauqua grounds. From its beginning as a tent city in 1902, the Chautauqua grew to more than 100 cottages by the time of its demise in 1938.
That early?
Yeah, well, that was the print, and you were there. Yes, you're in that picture too.
By the way,
Abby Alexander.
I want to comment, Mrs. Buzzard came all the way from Springfield. I love her. We were neighbors, Barry and Connie, at Forest Hills. And I want to tell you an episode that happened one day. Barry came home one day from work and he came over to my house. I wanted to tell you what happened today. So, he had some big shot politician or whatever coming out of Springfield for an inspection. And this guy had some ear problems. And so Barry said to him, well, he said, I better take you to the dispensary. So he takes this guy to the dispensary. The guy came from Eastern Europe or somewhere, a doctor, was hired by the state of Illinois to be at the state school. And this guy looks into Barry's ears with his, he says, oh yeah, he says, you have an obstruction of your fallopian tubes. Barry couldn't wait to get home and tell me that story. And by the way, there's another gentleman representing the state school, Curtis Fox there. His father, Dr. William Fox, ran the state school before Larry got here. And I was, let's see, I came home in '43 from Yore, and, 46. And the American Legion inducted a bunch of new members into the American Legion, and it was dedicated to the memory of Dr. William Fox. And it was in the gymnasium out there at the state school, and it was the largest class the Americans ever inducted. And it was in honor of Bill Fox, so, and I've enjoyed it. And happily, Curtis stayed around. He didn't go anywhere else on us. So I enjoyed that, telling that story very, very often. So one of the things I remember about being in the country is we had a big flood one time out there around View, and I can't tell you the name of the creek right down on the corner. Anyway, in a go around next to the creek, it really flooded badly, and one of the farmers by the name of Gallagher went out. Does anybody remember Warren Gallagher?
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, yes.
That was his father, died in a flood out there. Right up where
Sugar Creek.
Sugar Creek, yeah, thank you. And he was out there trying to get his cattle out. And, the stories I remember, Richard, is he was in a water trough. And it turned over on him and he didn't make it. So, and that was Warren's dad. I never knew Mr. Gallagher, but we all knew Warren well. So. Somebody else have a question? Or you can get up and walk out the door. Hauser Crane, my goodness, yes. Hauser Crane, Will Crane was his dad. Hauser was had polio as a youngster, and he was in a bicycle long before these fancy dimes with carts now. And Hauser cranked that bicycle all over hell and back with his arms. And then the big thing with Hauser, he's always said, in those days, the Elks sold sunshine bombs. for their crippled children's work. That was very important. By the way, I just want to divert myself just a minute at crippled children's business. In those days, the Elks sponsored and took care of a lot of crippled children. They had a fellow named Dr. Hugh Cooper came from Peoria once a month, checking these kids out. And they raised money once a year by having a festival at Elm Park. And that was right over here, which is now where the tire company is. Then they later moved her over to Scully Park, which is on the south side of the square there. But that was a big thing. And they had games of chance, so to speak. They had bingo. And all the money went to the benefit of the crippled children. Now, there again, I used that term a while ago that I thought was so unique. Crippled children, very common then. They don't use that now. I don't know what they're using. Handicapped, I presume. But in any event, it was very common that somebody was crippled, they were crippled. They didn't try to mask it or anything. So things have certainly changed, as today's politicians are finding out. The Burtonview had a school, one-room school. And I connected that school because a great grandmother of mine gave the school, the territory, that property for their school. And in the agreement, there was a statement that said if it ever ceased being a part of education, it would revert back to her estate. Well, Jack, my brother Jack, now gone, we found out about maybe through Richard. In any event, we said, boy, we could sure ruin some people's life, but my goodness gracious, what would it take to go back through the records to go through all of that? It was all, I always said, I went to school in Burtonview. I want to say something about Mr. Martin here. I don't want to embarrass him. But a friend of mine, who was my cousin really, in Billings, Montana, owned the ground adjacent to my mother's. And he stopped me on Alvy's Corner one day. He says, this farmer was stealing from me. And he said, he knows that I know he's stealing from me and he's gone. Can you find me a farmer? And I thought real quickly, and I said, I know a young man down on the road will make a heck of a phone call. The only problem with that is, Richard got in there, and I found out that my mother liked Richard better than she liked me. That had worked out. So we have become dear friends from that moment on. So let's go to the history of Burtonview. I want to talk about Coonhound Johnny.
Oh, God.
John Schwennahaw. His son was Vincent. And Vince Schwennahaw started the Tropics Restaurant at the Four Corners, what we call the Four Corners. I remember that corner for a different reason. That's the night that I had to go get my father out of bed at 12:30 at night, which was an hour past bedtime, his time, and tell him I'd wrecked his car at the Four Corners. That was a bitter moment. Here I am, 100 years old, I haven't lived it down yet. My father was a very bright man on raising kids. One time I snuck in a house a little late. An hour late, that's not a little. And I found him sitting on my bed smoking a cigarette. That cigarette looked like a train engine coming down the track. And his verbatim remarks to me, and I remember that all these years, I hope it was worth it, I'll talk to you in the morning. I went to bed and got me stew. Stew I did. And kid pranks, I can remember with another young man's father lost his car keys at the Maple Club, where we had no business being. And he had to go get his father, who was an attorney, by the way. Dad, I've lost my car keys. And so he probably did little penance for that, I imagine, down through the years. Little things pop into your mind which have absolutely no bearing whatsoever, but it's a part of about 3.5 hour presentation that I had.
Bill, I'm going to thank you for giving, I think you could go on all night, and we would love to hear you all night. But
I'm getting ready to shut
I
her
think we're
down.
probably just about at that point when we need to do that.
Good for you. Good for you. 3 pages of notes I won't have to use. I appreciate it.
You got one more you need to say.
Well, no, one thing I want to say, this place, the genealogy place, is a remarkable place here for our community. We are very lucky. I'm not stroking you, Diane. You're Bill. We're very lucky to have that. I bet you that I'd be surprised, all of us would be surprised, the number of people who come in here searching for a history about their family. And so you're doing a marvelous service for the community and certain individuals who take advantage of what you have to offer here. I've appreciated sitting here this year. I rambled a lot, and I knew I would, but I hope I haven't bored you to death. And if you have any questions, before I get out of here, go right ahead if you have any questions.
I think you're just going to fabulous.
Just the way I told you to clap, Connie.
Did I do it loud enough? Yeah.
I appreciate being here.